shows how much network actually matters.
100%.
Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole, the podcast where we explore the GSA stars, our alumni, winners and finalists from around the globe. Today we're gonna dive into the world of health tech and AI, but also the journey from founder to funder. Let's say founder to investor, but we wanted to say it in a funny way. I don't know if that fly or not. Radiobotics was a Nordic participant and finalist back in 2020-21, I think. And my guest today is Stine Mølgaard. She's one of the co-founders of Radiobotics and has now gone through a transformation journey. And if you look her up on LinkedIn, you will see she has several very important roles in the Danish ecosystem and is now on the other side of the table. She's now an investor. Welcome, Stine. I'm really happy.
Well, thank you.
You are here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we already had some discussions about the format here. And as I mentioned, we have these 3 chapters. 2 is about you, your journey and related to your professional and personal experience with the work. But the last chapter, we try to go down the rabbit hole, and it could be nice to hear that these stories that you might not talk about that often. So we're gonna end with a big splash, going down the rabbit hole. But let me start with, and let's start with the first question. Right now it seems like your every day is about VCs. You're in kind of a lot of boards, but your background is as a founder, among many other things, but you worked with Radiobotics for 5 years. And my first question to you is, when you founded Radiobotics, usually you have a good strategy, you have a vision with that company that you're creating. Did that change a lot during the 5 years, or could you see, you stopped being active in Radiobotics? Was it the right strategy, or did it change many times? How was that journey?
It's a really good question, and I'm glad you're asking it, because Mads, who I co-founded Radiobotics with at the time, we have actually gone back and looked into some of our early slides to see if what we tried to strategize around actually was the truth or what was actually happened. And it turned out that we had all the right plans and all the right milestones and inflection point in place, but what was not true was the timing. And so it just took longer than we had anticipated. So all our financial projections, all our things was maybe 1.5 year behind schedule. And I think that's very symptomatic for a lot of companies that you see. It just always takes longer. And it's easy to sit here and say so, because that's also what I see as an investor looking into the companies. But having that feeling of that we were thinking the right things, we were putting the right milestones in place in order to get to the point where we really wanted to take the company. But it just took so long, because this was in 2017 when we incorporated Radiobotics, and the world was not really ready for AI in healthcare, and we were spending a lot of time explaining what is this. That's not the case today, right? So today people is coming to you and say, we would like to purchase this. At that time, it was just like, I don't think we need this. And so we had the right plans. Timing was just not with us, and it took longer than we had expected.
It's a lot of stuff to unpack already, I think, and in a way, it's extraordinary that you are really spot on with the strategy, because we also often see in startups, as an investor, you probably have seen this a lot, that things can change, quite a lot from when you start. There's even this startup word for it, right? To do a pivot.
Yeah.
So you were on something, and you were on something very early. So it's interesting to look back at that time. Talking about AI, because I think a lot of people didn't really believe that AI was even something real.
At that time, politicians were still talking about having more people working in the healthcare system rather than thinking of how technology could support what they were doing. And that happened until after COVID in 2022. There was still the discussion on you needed more people. And now we really see that politicians has brought in on the agenda of, we cannot find these people, they're not there. So we need to help those who is actually in the healthcare system to support them in becoming better at what they already do. And that has not happened until recently. So think of in 2017, that was just totally up the hill.
Yeah, that's a long time ago in this context, like
right?
really. And
for some, it's just a second, but this feels like ages ago.
And things has really flipped upside down.
Yes, 100%.
In that regard.
I mean, with the whole OpenAI thing, where all normal people could all of a sudden, through a keyboard, actually you see the magic of AI. That has been a huge turning point in this.
Yeah, to make it accessible for anyone to play around with it.
Exactly.
Do you think, now we're at the topic, do you think, let's talk about the Danish government and how the policies are made and down that area, do you think that they do understand what is coming and how it should be utilized for society? In
2017, no, when we founded.
No, but I mean now.
Yes, so they have also been through a huge transformation. So I would say they become better. End of last year, I sit at the Tech Commission at the Danish Chamber of Commerce, and there we obviously discuss a lot of how the political landscape looks like and how we would like to see technology being governed in the future. And I was on a field trip into Brussels at the Parliament, and there we met with the AI House, which is the governed part of the AI Act. And I must say, I was so surprised of how well educated they were in the capabilities of AI technology and large language models and all of these things. And so I must say that I have very big confidence in the EU, even though they're trying to regulate. But the thing is, we also need to understand what those things means and how it influences us, because I'm in favor for some of those things, and I not always think it's trying to slow us down. I think it's actually trying to make us do better. But seeing the European politicians and their knowledge there, I was very confident that that is the right place to put this. Then going back to the Danish politicians that I once in a while meet, I miss that Danish politicians would be brave enough to take a project, a specific project, and say, we would like to see how technology can solve this problem. Let's say it's about recruiting people to the healthcare system, or it's about making new infrastructure, or it's a specific political challenge that then they try to use technology to see how can we find Danish companies that can support with solutions, how can we use data, how can we do a lot of things, so they have like best excellence that they have done themselves. Instead of a lot of these small projects, then they put aside 20 million Danish kroner for something that we should try and do. So I really need politicians that will dare to take on a larger project and actually show what technology can do, so it can influence future policies, future ways of how we can do those things. So it's not just small projects, project by project, but a bigger thing. And that's, if politicians have met me, they have also heard this before. And I really think it's time that we also dare to do more.
That's really interesting. It doesn't mean that they need to think of technology as a more fundamental, integrated thing across the whole spectrum, instead of you used to solve very specific things.
100%. I mean, so we've all seen the silo of thinking around technology, meaning there is a department for this, and now we see it's integrated into everything a company does: customer service, product development, infrastructure, backend, whatever it is, marketing, all the entire value chain of a company. And so there, it doesn't really make sense to think of it as a one isolated thing, because it transcends into everything. So definitely they need to think of it more of how can we leverage this and do more of what we have, but also an understanding of all the time what technology can do, because I do think that some politicians is talking about this as a distant thing. But and when I ask the question, have you tried it yourself? The answer is most likely not all the time.
Only if somebody guided in that direction, because they're so busy in there every day, so they have to be.
But it's also really taking what we have now. One thing is also being very visionary of building things for the future. But let's try and solve problems we have right now with technology that's already ready to support in this. And that I would really like to see to be more incremental in what's happening, especially from a political side.
You definitely have a lot of strong thoughts around this topic.
So thank you for asking.
Yeah, but I find it very interesting, and now I'm more curious. What could we do to make that change? Because I feel like what you are referring to is something that has to be changed now, and we really cannot wait, because the change is now with artificial intelligence, and everything is going very rapidly fast in other societies. So
yes, I think one thing is changing the narrative of because sometimes it actually doesn't go that fast. And so we have to remember that it's, I mean, when I sold my first company, which was way before Radiobotics, 2 years later, a very, very big company came back and said, now we're ready to purchase similar kind of technology that you built 2 years ago. And if some of the biggest technology companies in the world didn't see that, and 2 years later they were ready, that is an indication of the things move potentially fast, but it doesn't move that fast. So we shouldn't be too stressed about the time, so to say, but we should be stressing about thinking of how can we solve problems. And sometimes it's not technology that's the solution. It might be having more people. But very often today we will see that it is actually technology that in some way can support in this.
Yeah.
And when I ask the question of what can we do, or when you ask the question, I will then say, what is the biggest problem you need to solve? And we have a lot of problems in society, but also from a political side of we don't have enough people to come work in many ways. We need to have more people to pay more taxes so we can fund welfare and all those kind of things. So that is the two evident problems. And I really do think that technology can optimize what we do, and we can make more money out of those things, and we can educate more great people that can actually help us do those things. So I think that there is actually solutions to these massive challenges, and then we have to think of how does technology help us in that. And I think that that's the small problems you have now. I'm pretty sure there is somebody that had the same problem and built a solution for that.
You're actually touching a very specific problem. So it almost sounds like you are pivoting towards going back to creating a startup. And that specific problem, you're referring to attracting the workforce to Denmark, or making sure that your workforce is distributed the right way compared to what we need. Is that what you want to solve?
But that was essentially why we built Radiobotics, right? So obviously my references and my numbers is a little old because I left the company a couple of years ago. So the numbers we used at that time, and it's probably even bigger and more today. But we saw that. So we were trying to support radiologists in the description of the medical images that they are working with, and in that, it takes 10 years to become a radiologist, meaning that we cannot educate yourself out of the problem. We cannot just put more people there because they are not there. And if they were there, they don't want to be specialized in to become a radiologist because you basically sit in the basement and look at medical images. So it's not very attractive. And so the first clinical project we had with Radiobotics, we had gotten funding to hire a PhD student to actually support in this project. And we couldn't find one because nobody wanted to work in the field that we were working in because it's simply too boring. So that is a huge indication of we need to automate.
Very good example where AI can really
exactly
do good, right?
So that has been the fundamental thought of, let's try to automate those things nobody really wants to spend time on. So you have very sexy, let's call it that, and very prestigious things, especially in radiology, and that can be most often is related to cancer because a lot of funding is being put into this, and it's more prestigious to solve problems here because it obviously has a huge mortality. But the bread and butter of medical imaging is people that goes to the emergency room and they break something, it's a fracture, it is a dislocation, or it's something just because we get older. And that is the numbers there are massive. And that's really where I think
a lot of savings of resources if that was automated.
100%, but that's easy to say, but that doesn't necessarily sell things because you have to have done the calculation. You have to see that you need this. And I'm not saying that Radiobotics is the perfect solution for this, but any other solution, I don't care which one it is, but it's just the understanding of where can technology actually help solve your problem. And there I think we should look at those that doesn't, because it's also risky to put an AI technology to describe images with the risk of cancer, because that's very severe if you overlook anything. But the thing that where people are already waiting 5 weeks to get a
simple.
Exactly, simple and maybe even low risk in the terms of if there are any mistakes, because it is difficult to build these algorithms, right?
I'm really fascinated with your passion around this, talk about technology. And we already had a discussion before where I could feel it. You started early. This is not part of what we planned, but I really want to dive a little deeper in this interest in AI, because now we talked about it already when you started Radiobotics with your co-founder and co-founders.
Yeah, there was 4 of us.
Then it was very early stage for AI. So how were you introduced to AI? Were you already on that path for many years, or Was it one of those random things we talked about in the beginning?
But already at that time, we didn't want to call it AI because we felt it was such a buzzword, and it was just like this could be everything, right? So I mean, in the early slides we have of it's ML and it's machine learning models, and we're using machine learning to be very specific on how we're actually trying to solve the problem, and that hasn't changed, right? So I think, but we were too early for the rest of society to understand the impact and the influence of what this technology could do. But I would say, and that's the advice and an observation for other founders, is obviously you need to find those people who believes in what you're trying to do very early on. And those who just says no, you just have to leave them. You can't convince those, but you have to find those few people that believes in what you're doing very early on. And we were very lucky to get a very recognized professor in radiology very early on to actually believe in what we were doing. And that has been very, very fundamental for the first years of Radiobotics, that there was this clinician that actually believed in what we were trying to do, while the rest of the world was saying, no thanks.
It makes me reflect on the path to AI was maybe just an interest in technology in general.
It was definitely an interesting technology, but so I came from a company before that created camera technology, so I was a little bit in that space, but that was more for consumer technology. And what really had me when I met Mads, who actually had the idea of Radiobotics, was that let's try to use technology to solve a little bit more of a, let's call it
important problem or
worthwhile problem,
yeah.
And not just for consumer technology, but actually something where there's more substance to why is that technology is a future thing, right?
And was it also a random meeting when you met your co-founder the first time?
Yes and no. So I met Mads first time when I was at Lundbeck, and that's 100 years ago. And Mads, we had great conversations, and because I paid for the dinner or the wine or whatever, Mads was thinking we should do more together. So that was pretty smart choice. That was pretty random. But then obviously because we were working with camera technology, there was a group of people from DTU called the Imaging Group that sort of knew each other. So it was a little bit of a
connection to
so there were some connections, and we also had some common friends and things. So there was a few things, and we have had discussions. So actually, while I was at the other company, he came to the office and we had discussions. And the fun fact is, the CTO and the other co-founder of Radiobotics, I was in a very early conversation of hiring him in my first company, but that eventually closed down because it was going into an M&A process, so that never happened. And then he became the CTO of Radiobotics. So
beautiful. That was a good chapter 1, I think. I think the important storyline here was to understand your passion, and to me it seems like technology is a big part of your DNA.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be part of that. Not saying that technology just for the sake of technology, but really understanding what are the problems we can solve with this. And I think that's really what we have to ask ourselves every day, right?
Maybe we couldn't end this chapter where it was about the journey with Radiobotics, but we branched out a little bit. But one memory from your time in Radiobotics that really stands out for you, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be anything, really big, but something that is so...
Can I pick 2 things?
Absolutely.
So one thing is the first time you have a customer that actually wants your product.
The first time.
The first time you feel that you solve an actual problem for somebody and they're willing to pay for it.
Who was the customer the first time?
So that sparkle in the eye of that you have held it was a Danish hospital. I can't remember the setup, but that changes. Regions and all of those things changes. So, but just that sparkle in the eye of that you have helped somebody solve a very evident problem. Because that's eventually what you're trying to do. You're trying to help somebody, right? The second thing is what makes me proud of Radiobotics is when I see former colleagues become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And because what we really need in general is an ecosystem, right? We need people that starts a company, and out of that you can see sort of the flywheel of others wanting to start a company as well. So what afterwards makes me most proud is those that I work with that is wanting to become entrepreneurs themselves.
This is something we have discussed many times in this podcast already, that is what you look for.
Yeah.
Like the rings in the water.
When they reach out, I would anytime take a meeting with them.
Very good. Stine, let's go to the chapter 2.
Yes.
We call it the path from founder to investor, but you had a better name for it, so we call it from founder to funder.
exactly.
And that's basically your journey. If, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you go to your LinkedIn, you will see there is many different things, but there is a red line. So it's you share a lot of your insights and knowledge as board member in several boards. But it seems like your day job, or what you focus on a lot of the time, is working in a VC company. And that journey, going from founder to investor, I think it's an interesting thing, and I hope it's a trend that takes on more. And you can see it also from data that more VC funds are established by emerging fund managers that used to be founders. Could you give any advice to maybe a startup founder or someone in the ecosystem that somehow has that aspiration?
I could if I had a plan when I started. So I never thought I would end here. I've never thought that I would become a GP or partner in a VC fund. But obviously, the more you are in the ecosystem and the more you're exposed to other funds and investors and these things, it obviously sort of comes out of the horizon, so to say. But I have never in my entire life thinking I wanted to become a partner in a fund.
So how come you want that now?
And actually also when Alliance reached out, I was very hesitant, thinking that wasn't necessarily for me. But what really convinced me, and what convinces you in most of the big decisions you make in your life, I believe, is that you meet great people. So I would say my decision was 95% of the people I met at Alliance, the other partners that's already there. And I was actually very surprised of how now I've spoken to 5 partners and I think they're equally nice. And how can that be? And so that was actually my first sort of part of convincing both myself, but also seeing that VC had a different face, and I really saw that in Alliance. I had not necessarily always met that face, and that was maybe why I was trying not to go in there, because I didn't really, maybe I had a different perspective of it, and that really changed in the discussions with Alliance. So I mean, in order to answer your question of that, I didn't plan this, so I can't really say how you should do this. But what was obviously the best thing I have done in order to end up here was that I started investing early on myself. So I started when I exited the first company I was part of in 2017, just before Radiobotics. I started investing myself, so that you actually become aware of how does it look like on both sides. It was obviously very small tickets and those things, so it was nothing big, but it was really that kind of thinking of a portfolio, thinking of how do you do investments, what kind of terms do you want to put out there, how do you support the companies that you have involved in, and how do you both support them and build your own company at the same time. That kind of dual insights into both investing and getting investments was maybe the biggest asset I brought to the table when meeting with Alliance.
We talked about it earlier that you like diverse input, you like diverse team. And I think this is also a little bit what we are talking about now in the VC world, that has gone through a transformation. So if you go 10 years back, maybe it was a certain type that you will find in a VC fund, where now you can see many emerging funds are way more diverse in their partner team. Can you tell about your thought on that?
100%. I mean, so in all other things that doesn't work really well is because it's very homogeneous, right? And VC's funds has by definition been very homogeneous, people coming out of corporate finance and those things, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we also need those capabilities as well. But it's also thinking of how do you get different perspectives around the table, and that's something we discuss quite a lot at Alliance. I mean, we obviously, we all white people and between 40 to 60 kind of thing. And so that can also be homogeneous in some way, but we still like to think of what is the diversity of perspectives that we bring to the table. And that is obviously different backgrounds and is different paths towards becoming a VC and how operational
so
you have
more
been.
What you have in your backpack and not
Exactly. What do you bring to the table, and what do you believe in, and how do you work? So we also, because we need to assess startups in so many different perspectives that we need. I mean, so it's not a secret that I'm not so much focused on the financial part, but some of my other partners are. I very much spend time with the founders, and I more enjoy meeting them for lunch and drink coffee with them and have a conversation like we have. And then I will go back home and I will look at the slides and I would dig in the numbers and I would do those things. Whereas my other partners, they would do all this work before they would meet with them. And so we just need to do these things very differently in order to have, the benefit of the doubt of what does a good company actually look like. In the VC space, it's still a little homogeneous. I mean, when I founded Radiobotics, I was mostly, there was not that many female founders, and I was part of the statistics of, those very few that actually attract capital and those things. And I'm actually back in that statistics, so only 2% of women GPs that has voting rights in the fund is females. And so I feel I start a little bit over again, but I'm definitely here to do those things. But I feel good in this environment. So there's nothing, I feel that the people who wants to do this we're here for the startups, and we don't discuss so much gender diversity, but obviously diversity in a very broader sense. And I think that's taken very serious, but we still need to change some things because we can see where the money ends up. It's still very homogeneous in the sense of where the capital is being invested, right?
Do you have any takes on what needs to be done?
I wish, but I promise I'm here to try to make the change.
I mean, you're doing by doing it in a way, right? So you are transforming.
I've always said that if you complain, you need to do something, right? So you have heard me complain about those too few female investors, and I actually remember in a discussion when I was trying to figure out where I should place myself after Radiobotics, and I had a good friend of mine that said, Stine, you're taking one for the team. So you have been offered this, given the opportunity to become a GP, now you take it. So I've taken the opportunity and trying to change the numbers.
Does it mean that you are also looking extra for the female founders because you have to look maybe more because there's less female founders, and then you're really focused on finding them?
So pipeline is not as big as with male founders, and there's a good reason for those. I don't necessarily well, I mean, I have done a lot of thinking around how do you do these things. I mean, I really like to see diversity in its broadest essence. So I really like to see young people. I would really like to see people coming from other places. I would really like to see international students. I would really like to see women as well. But I really like to think of how is in general much more diverse. That I really want to do a lot. Sometimes it obviously doesn't fit into the fund, but at least I'm here to help. So yes, I do favorize a little bit if it is with a diversity.
If they check the other boxes, then you are
definitely. And I really most often I can't invest, but most often I can help, and that I think is also a good place to start to see if you can be supportive and helpful.
Yeah, that's very good. If you cannot invest, then you still spend your time
and that's
bringing them further.
Really, something we discuss a lot in the partner team is how can we be supportive.
So it's a value in your work in the fund. So
and it gives great pleasure to actually help. I mean, obviously also we don't do that many investments. So I mean, we will do maybe 8-10 investments a year, and in the entire Nordics, meaning that we obviously will do, when the fund is ready, we will obviously do those things, but still thinking of in between that, my only job is to help.
Stine, let's circle back to AI. So now you have been in the investment space for a while and you know how it works. What is the tech stack that you use in your own VC fund? How will AI change how we invest? And will AI also mean that some of the investments that has been done, let's say the last 5 years, might end up not being good investments because of this transformation that's happening?
Yeah, so I mean, so you can look at the portfolio of Alliance that I obviously haven't been a partner of, and that there's some tendencies and trends we have looked into there, and then you can obviously see I can look at my own investments. So yes, obviously, I mean, every time for the last 2 years, when OpenAI, they have their developer conference in May and launching new products, I sit back and think now maybe 100 companies were made redundant of whatever they launched. So that is a huge threat.
Yeah.
And
as a VC, that's something you look at, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And then it makes you think, and it makes you all the time going back to the drawing board and thinking, how do we invest in technology that's not made redundant in 5 minutes when OpenAI just launched a new GPT-5 model or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's really something we think about and something we try to sort of strategize around. I don't have because it's a moving target. I don't have the answer, so to say, but we're really trying to look into like in which market is it solving problems, for instance, and what is the size of the market if we're able to solve this. And then what we really discuss and what has become more important is the defensibility of the technology. Is like, how easily can you also do this, and how are you actually able to protect your technology as we go and as the society evolves around it and technology becomes a commodity, so to say, right? So what I really think and what we discuss a lot is obviously the data that you use in order to build your technology, because
that is the asset that is not depending on what AI is put into play. Because
that's depending on the quality of the output of the technology that you have built, and how is that put together, and how do you get more of those? So a lot of early stage startups, they have great ideas, but they often go out of business because they couldn't get the data.
Yeah.
Or get the data right, or build the right models to subtract whatever they needed from the data. So I really see something there that you really have to look into and have a good understanding of how do they place themselves there. And then it's obviously the efficiency and the sort of the accuracy of the output of whatever you're trying to solve. So for medical imaging is obviously
the core of what you're building. But I agree with the data. I think that's going to be the real value in many companies, because the tech part will be a layer that will be easier and easier to add on to 100%. The data, right?
But just, I mean, thinking of like all of these agents you have today, and you can think of how easily you can build a website today just by finding an agent that can, you basically just tell it, build me a website that looks like this and I want to sell this.
It's incredible, yeah.
And think of that, I mean, it's amazing, right? So that is just so easy to do those things. So you also have to think of how easy it for others to do. So now you can't sell websites as you did 20 years ago.
You have to be a little faster adapting to the new opportunities.
Exactly.
And it leads me to want you to ask about your own tech stack in your VC fund and VC company. In Global Star Awards and EXO, we're really focusing on our tech stack. So we have our own proprietary software to run the competition, but we're really trying to figure out how can we automate things using AI agents combined with HubSpot and third-party tools. And the more you look into it, the more you see you can do with it, and the more you feel like you have to do it faster. Because when this really takes off, I think the companies and organizations that doesn't do this, they will be left behind very fast. And I'm curious to ask you, from the VC perspective, how do you work with tech stack in your fund?
It's a really good question. And we're a very small fund, right? So we only 8 employees, more or less 9, and we are 6 partners. So we're very partner heavy. And that's a little, how you say, different from many other funds where there will be a few partners and then you have many more employees. So we've chosen to be partners, and that's purely based on that we want to make decisions fast, and we want to, if the first person you meet in a meeting with a VC should be a partner, so we can very quickly tell whether we should continue or not.
Yeah.
And that's the stand we have taken very early on, but that also means we need more technology too, because
So it's a good time to have that construction.
A partner doesn't scale very well.
No.
So we have done a lot of thoughts, but also thinking of how can we automate things. So we invested in a company called DeckMatch. Mm-hmm. That basically analyzes all our decks. So
I can guess what it does.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yes. So basically, I forward most of my emails to that contains a pitch deck or a link or something like that, and it's not right all the time, and it's still early on.
What does it do? It gives you like a prediction of within some parameters of the strength in different areas?
First of all, I have inputted my investment strategy. So my geographical area, things I don't invest in.
Like a checklist first, and it checks, this is actually without your scope, first of all?
Then the first thing is that it will tell me whether we have a fit or not.
Yeah, that's the first checkpoint, right?
That's the first checkpoint. Yeah. And sometimes if it's just if it's not a pure rejection, I will also look at it. I still think I need to look at it. And we still need people.
So you look at everything, even with the...
I look at a lot, and I look at a lot more than you would think, because I'm also very curious to see what there is, but also that I learn from looking at these things.
That's a good point. I think there's a lot of learning in looking at it.
100%. I mean, and also, again, back to the biases and the diversity of you also need to find the outliers once in a while, right? So I do look at a lot, and then we obviously input it into a CRM system that everybody else has, but we're obviously also trying to work with the data there.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, for me, it's about meeting the people, really, and you can use a lot of AI to analyze, and you can then get the report out of DeckMatch, and then thinking this looks great from an investment thesis, and then you meet with the people, and then you start doing your analysis of, are they right in the assumptions that they have, and can I verify the size of the market and those things. So what I do is more that I don't do the fundamental search, but I do more of the validation, the verification of what is said.
In essence, it saves you time, so you can select the meetings that brings the most value, because you cannot meet everyone. I don't know.
I wish I could. I would love to meet some of these entrepreneurs. They're amazing, but yeah, no, I can't do that, and you have to be very selective end of day, right?
Yeah. Very good.
And then sometimes I also, because you get so many emails, and that's actually, it's a huge dilemma in my head, because I really like to be responsive, and I really like to be approachable, and I really like to be out there.
But there's a limit to what you can do as a person, right?
I can't scale myself, and so sometimes I also just use, the Google prompt of how you can respond to emails.
Yeah, it's very effective.
So the dilemma is it better responding with an automated
as long as you direct it, maybe you can save time writing the words, but you can direct it. That's how I personally use it a lot. It's still me, but I save a lot of time not writing. Sorry?
I press the button so my prompt is, please kindly reject the opportunity. It's out of scope.
I use it quite often where I dictate what I want to write.
Yeah.
And then I know it is a GPT that is instructed to write in a certain way. So it writes what I want to say, but it just does it without my spelling mistakes.
Yes.
And it actually formulates a little bit better. I check it, and I save a lot of time like that. But I feel like it's still me, and I can be 10 times as effective, because you speak a lot faster, right?
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing the tech side of your fund. And at DSA, we also come across many pitch decks, because that's part of what you have to give. And that was part of your journey when you participated in Global Startup Awards, was the pitch deck and the data. And now we have a lot of data points in the competition.
I can imagine,
So our way of working with this is similar. But I think we have to close down the chapter now, and we want to go to the last part, which is going down the rabbit hole. And I can tell you're very good at sharing your passion and your journey. So it could be nice to go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
And for example, when you were working with Radiobotics, it was, I know, being an entrepreneur myself, that it's hard to build a company, and it's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of loops to jump over, and often you have to carry it by yourself. Even though you have co-founders, there are some things that you have to carry, right? Were there any moment in that path where you almost gave up? Maybe you never told anyone, but you were like, okay, I'm not good enough to do this, I can't do it, or I had enough, or you had that experience?
You very often, knock your head against the wall in many ways, right? Because people just saying no and getting out of meetings where you have a sensation of they just don't get it. And that frustration of that people don't get it is really what sometimes you can just be, if they don't get it, then you can just leave it, right? But I wouldn't say that I've had a moment of where I sort of wanted to give up per se, and there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes you also have to kill your darlings, right?
That's the hardest thing to do, right?
That's actually the hardest thing. So maybe I have just not been good enough at giving up. That's
an interesting paradox there, right?
While I'm saying this, but I've always thought of it as if we when looking into to a challenged road ahead, thinking we still have opportunities. There's still things we can do here. There's still ways we can survive, and there's still ways we can try to put a product into the market and those things. I have always been wanting to, we need to this needs to be empty before I will give up. And maybe it would have even been more healthy to just resign a little bit before that, maybe. So I've never had this kind of situation, but I would say that later on, now that I've invested in a company that went bankrupt, and I would say they had no more opportunities. And I was very confident that there was nothing else we could have done. And I also said to the founder that I invested in that I would always invest in his next company, because I felt we tried to do everything that was in our...
You need to have that madness a little bit. And I think we talked about it before, that it's a bit like being in love in a way, because you cannot approach it rationally all the time. You have to rationally list your potential solutions. Some of them has to be a little bit crazy, 100%. Because you have to invent solutions that might not be easy, right?
And you have to sort of make the path as you go, right?
Yeah.
But it's also the insisting on that there are still opportunities here. And now that I've seen both sides of it, I do think that maybe you should just have been brave enough to actually let go before. And that at least is a trait I can see in repeat founders, is that they are much faster in saying, if this doesn't fly within a year, I'm just going to leave it.
Yeah, or change into something else.
100%, or just do a classical pivot into something else. But I at least see that that's also what it does to you, that you have tried this many times before. So maybe I would actually say that when I can't answer your question, it's just I have not been good enough to actually kill something.
I think I can recognize that in my own journey, that the thing about taking decision fast, you also need experience to do that. And you become better with that with time, at least for me personally.
Yeah.
It can be hard to take fast decisions on something important when you are not that experienced. So that's also where the mentorship comes in, I think, as a investor, right?
And it's something I see myself as maybe being supportive with, and as an investor, is helping making decisions. Because I do think it's very difficult, but the thing is, how do you help with that? And that is sometimes often a structured process of how do you see this challenge from many perspectives? How do you find the right people to ask for input or advice? Or how do you structure a process in a board or in a management team in order to actually facilitate the decision? But as I said to before, like, no decision is also a decision. So if you try to hide it and leave it, then you have also made a decision. Yeah. And that's what I think is very important to remember.
That might always be a bad decision not to take one.
Exactly. No, but I mean, I really want to take very open-eyed, obvious decisions, right? Yeah. We took this. And
you have to be brave. I think it takes some bravery.
You also have to be brave, because it's so difficult. And because you're working in an environment where you have so many unknowns that you don't know what this is, but then you have to then go back and then think of what needs to be right in order for me to make a decision, and then let's try to go there, right?
And sometimes there is no right path, but you have to pick a path.
Yes.
And that's also really important to remember as a founder.
And that's back to the solutions, right? Yeah. So if there's still opportunities ahead, we go down that path, and then we have to go back and find the other one.
Stine, it was a pleasure to have a conversation with you. This podcast is for me a great opportunity to pick brains on people, in this case, because we are from Denmark. I know your name. We met before, but we never had a long conversation like this. No, we never had a really good conversation. We should have more of those. We can do that without the cameras. But thank you for coming, Stine. It was a pleasure. And thank you for watching GSA Stars podcast, Down the Rabbit Hole. Every new podcast we will interview and talk to a great winner or finalist from the GSA alumni. See you next time.
Thank you.